In fact, GPUs that we sold 6 years ago, the prices are going up. It's not like it's antique. I mean, it's incredible. It's like a fine wine. The demand is so high that GPUs I sold 6 years ago are going up in price.
6-year-old chips, appreciating in value. Jensen Huang just said something that made even Wall Street stop and stare. And if you hold Nvidia stock, this changes everything you need to know right now. Here's the thing most people are missing. Everyone is arguing about whether Nvidia is about to crash or explode. Retail investors are nervous, analysts are divided, and every other headline is either calling this the greatest infrastructure build-out in history.
Demand is sky high, and there's a fundamental reason for that. We're in the once-in-a-generation infrastructure build-out. This is the largest infrastructure build-out in human history, and there's a fundamental reason for that.
That phrase, once-in-a-generation infrastructure build-out, is easy to dismiss as marketing, but here's why you shouldn't. Think about what Jensen is actually describing. The entire world's computing infrastructure, every server, every data center, every system that powers the internet as we know it, is being ripped out and replaced. Not upgraded, replaced. The old way of computing, where general-purpose chips handled everything, is giving way to a completely new architecture built around accelerated computing. And the chips that power this new era, they're almost exclusively Nvidia's. Now here's the number that puts the scale of this moment into real perspective.
Going to be roughly $2 trillion of spending here in the United States. That is more than all of the spending in NASA. That is more than the spending for the U.S. highway across the United States.
$2 trillion from just 5 companies: Oracle, Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, and Google. That's more than the entire United States highway system cost to build. That's more than every NASA mission ever funded, combined. And that spending doesn't stop in 2025. It runs all the way through 2030. Let that sink in for a second. 5 companies, $2 trillion, 6 years of committed capital. That is not a bubble. Bubbles don't have 5 of the most profitable companies in history writing trillion-dollar checks to sustain them. That is a structural shift, the kind that only happens once or twice in a generation. But here's where the story gets complicated, because not everything Jensen is saying is going smoothly behind the scenes. And this is the part that's been making investors nervous.
Whoa. Before we start talking about the next chip, we're struggling to deploy the current chip. And so this chip is called the Grace Blackwell chip.
That's the part the bulls don't want to talk about. While Jensen is already hinting at the next generation of chips, a family called Vera Rubin, the companies actually trying to deploy the current chips, known as Blackwell, are hitting serious walls. We're talking overheating. We're talking chips that weren't working properly when customers first received them. Microsoft and Amazon, 2 of Nvidia's biggest buyers in the world, reportedly had to reduce their orders or push back timelines because the chips weren't performing as expected straight out of the box. And this isn't a small technical footnote buried in a quarterly report. When you're cramming tens of billions of transistors into a confined space and asking them to run continuously inside data centers that were designed years ago, you run into the hard limits of physics. Heat becomes the enemy, power density becomes a serious problem, and the smooth rollout that Wall Street already priced in starts getting delayed. Nvidia did release an updated version, moving from one model of the Blackwell chip to an improved version, and that helped. But many of the largest artificial intelligence companies, including OpenAI and major cloud providers, are still in the early phases of getting these systems fully up and running. So the obvious question is, why aren't Nvidia holders panicking because of this?
But even still, people don't have a clear scale alternative to Nvidia chips, and so they kind of just have to go along as, things get figured out in the process.
That's the whole game right there. There is no real alternative to Nvidia at scale. Not yet. Advanced Micro Devices is trying. Custom chips from Google and Amazon exist, but none of them can replace Nvidia across the board for the kind of workloads that artificial intelligence demands right now. So, what actually happens in practice? Customers complain, customers negotiate small discounts, and then customers keep buying anyway, because they have no other choice. This is what a near monopoly in motion looks like. It's not clean, it's not perfect, but it holds. And as long as that dynamic holds, Nvidia's position remains extraordinarily difficult to challenge. Now we need to pause here, because this is the exact moment where a lot of investors get shaken out. Remember what we opened with? Jensen Huang saying 6-year-old chips are going up in price, like fine wine. That image stuck with people because it sounds almost impossible in the technology world. Tech hardware is supposed to lose value fast. A chip from 6 years ago should be worth almost nothing today. That's how this industry has always worked, until now. So why is the opposite happening? And what does it actually tell us about where Nvidia is headed? That question is the key to understanding whether this stock is about to explode, or whether the warning signs are telling you to get out. Here's the answer, and it's one that most financial commentators aren't framing clearly enough. There are two very different reasons a stock can fall or stall. The first is demand destruction, meaning people stop wanting the product. Sales slow. The market moves on. That's a company in serious trouble. And the second reason is a capacity constraint, meaning people want the product desperately, but there simply isn't enough of it to go around yet. Those two situations are not the same thing, not even close, and confusing them is one of the most expensive mistakes an investor can make. The risk to Nvidia isn't that the AI hype dies tomorrow. The risk is that the infrastructure simply cannot be built fast enough to satisfy the capital waiting to be deployed. That's the verdict, and it reframes everything. The overheating issues with Blackwell chips are real, the deployment delays are real, but they are engineering problems, not demand problems. Every major hardware transition in modern history ran into thermodynamics as its first serious wall, the shift to multi-core processors, the rollout of wireless networks. Heat is always the opening battle, and it is always, eventually, solved. In Nvidia's case, the solution points toward liquid cooling infrastructure across data centers, and here's the almost ironic part. Solving that problem creates an entirely new wave of spending across the hardware ecosystem. More companies benefit, more capital gets deployed. The problem, in solving itself, generates more revenue for the broader industry. It's a rising tide that lifts more boats than most people realize. There's also a major shift happening in software that is flying under the radar. Analysts are already sounding the alarm that artificial intelligence agents are going to disrupt traditional software companies, the ones that charge per user, per seat, per license every month. Those business models are under real pressure. One analyst put it bluntly, those companies are going to be trading dollars for dimes. But what replaces those software systems runs on infrastructure, and that infrastructure runs on Nvidia. Meanwhile, the fine wine comment tells you exactly where we are in this cycle. When 6-year-old hardware appreciates in value, it means the market is nowhere near saturation. Supply is so scarce, so desperately needed, that even old chips are worth more today than they were last year. Nvidia's next chip family, Vera Rubin, is approaching. Early signals suggest the transition from Blackwell to Vera Rubin should be a smoother process than what customers went through before. But the companies that got burned during the Blackwell rollout are already thinking more carefully about how fast they move. Some may deliberately wait. Some may push deployments toward mid-2027 rather than racing to be the first in line, because being first and not being able to get things running properly directly hurts their margins. We are watching the industrialization of intelligence unfold in real time. It will be loud, it will be messy, there will be setbacks that make headlines, but the investors who understand the difference between short-term friction and long-term direction will be the ones still standing and profiting when the next major leg of this story begins.